Dzień dobry, everybody. Yeah, I won't talk Polish. That's the only thing I know beside kurwa mać. So, yeah, it can be quite helpful in many cases. Thanks to be here for this talk about chopping the monolith. That's my first time at JavaConf. Actually, that's my second time, but the first time was online. I'm Nicolas Fränkel. I've been a developer for quite a long time, and then I became dissatisfied with all the process of like projects and requirements and schedules and crazy changes. So now I'm a developer advocate, and I always say before I took it to my heart, if you didn't listen to my advices, now if you don't listen, that's fine, I will never know. So there is a, who was in the previous talk already? Nobody? Oh, sorry, it's Poland. Who was in the previous talk? Yes, thanks. I would expect that from like the northern countries, but it seemed like Polish people are super shy. Well, I didn't expect, yeah, you agree? Yeah. Polish people, okay, I didn't know. So the previous talk was all unicorns and rainbows and microservices and stuff. I will probably rain on the parade. I will adopt a very contrarian point of view. So it's very controversial. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, because I do this talk in many countries, so if you feel that you are offended by my talk, that it hurts your beliefs, just leave the room and everything will be fine. So at the moment, my problem is that if you are doing monolith, you are a bad developer, and if you are doing microservices, you are a good developer. Who here is a good developer? Yes, be proud. Come on, keep your hands up, because I need to count a bit. Now you feel the trap, there are not that many. Who here is a bad developer doing monolith? Yeah, it's half-half, interesting. And then there are people who are neither good nor bad, they are not developers at all. Okay, that's fine. So before ranting a bit, we need to define what are microservices. So I won't define it, I just take Martin's follow definition, and I keep it at that. If you are not happy, you bring it to Martin, and then you say you are not happy. But that's the basics. And in the same article where Martin Fowler defines microservices, he goes on to list some characteristics of microservices. So like this. Oh, where is it? Here. So in general, at the beginning, everything is fine. Componentization via services, I mean, that's the basics. Organized around business capabilities, blah, 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 blah. And at the end, it's products, not projects. So the difference is that the project has a start date, and at the start date, you generally have an end date, and you have a budget that goes from the start date to the end date. Whereas products, you have a start date, but in general, at the beginning, you don't know when you will end the product. Of course, you probably will end it at some point, but you don't know when. And the budget might be recurring. So among the people who are doing microservices, who are doing products according to this definition? One hand? Two hands? That's a lot less than before. So the rest, consider yourself bad developers, right? You are not doing microservices. And it doesn't stop there. At the beginning, when people were telling about microservices, it was a bit less than 10 years ago, they were very keen on talking about Conway's law. Who knows about Conway's law? Most people, that's good. So the idea of Conway's law is that the communication channels inside an organization will actually impact and model the architecture. So if we have a communication channel where we have like 3 teams of UI specialists talking to middleware specialists and middleware specialists talking to DBAs, then we have the 3 tiers architecture. Nobody said, hey, let's design this 3-tier architecture. The 3 tiers architecture just evolved naturally from how we were organized. So we should reverse Conway's law and saying if we want to have autonomous microservices, we should have autonomous self-contained teams. And for that, Amazon Web Service is the poster child of microservices. They organized themselves around 2 pizzas team. Depending if the person is American or Polish or French, the size of the pizza might be different, the size of the team might be different, but yeah, it's still small teams. But there is a problem, because when we want to move from the organization to the left on the organization to the right, we have this person blocking our changes. Who do you think I wanted to represent with this picture? A manager, yeah, exactly. And not every who here is a manager? Already 2. I need to run fast. Not every kind of manager, actually the middle manager. So just to be honest, I have had good middle managers before in more than 20 years, but probably less than the number of fingers on my hand. I always told, if you are a manager and your only responsibility is to approve my vacation requests, to be the proxy of my raise every year, because you cannot negotiate, right? It's really a proxy. You've got X%, or X can be 0, and then do some kind of reporting. It's not really a lot of added value, especially if you are paid more than me. And I believe I'm older than most of you. Believe me, when I was younger, it was worse. They were paid a lot, and we were doing all the work. So the problem of this person is that here they have a place. There is a middle manager here, and a middle manager here, and a middle manager here. Where are the middle managers in the self-contained autonomous teams? Did they magically become Scrum Masters? So the problem is, if you want to change your organization, you will need the help of middle managers. And on the right side, there is no place for them. Or worse, everybody see what real added value they have, which is in general, again, not a lot. But in general, we all address the microservices architecture from the technical point of view. Nobody talks about organizations anymore. So the story goes, hey, I'm a very influential architect or solution architect or CTO. I come to a new organization. I've read about microservices. I will just implement microservices. And even if you realize everything technically by the book, it will be a massive failure. You will get none of the benefits of microservices and all the issues. So if you are smart enough, you leave, you put microservices on your resume, and who is left to maintain the big ball of crap that I left? Yes. So if it's such a mess, why do people still are crazy about microservices? Well, Martin Fowler said 3 main benefits of microservices. So I will go through each of them, and let's talk whether it's a real reason. So the first one is strong module boundaries. If you have microservices, there is no big ball of mud. You have completely decoupled modules. And in some cases, you have monorepo, then I don't understand, but it's another problem. But imagine you have a single repo for every service. It means you cannot draw dependency between them. Everything is neatly organized. That's one benefit, right? But it's a bit harsh. I believe there are other ways to achieve the same. Who here is a Java developer who works on Java? Oh, most people. So probably you know about G-molecules and ArcUnit. So you can write your architectural rules who knows about it? Because I see, okay, great, yeah, that's the Polish face, right? Very, yeah. No feedback, no, yeah. Great. Okay, I need to remember it. So you can write your architectural rules in unit tests and make them like run them at every build. And if package A shouldn't depend on package B, you fail the build. Well, works well. You have Spring monolith. Even if you are not on the Java stack, you can have like SonarQube, and you can check the package dependency between each other and fail the build again. So my thinking about these strong module boundaries is having microservices to enforce strong module boundaries is like saying, I want to learn with my left hand, so I will cut my right hand. It probably will work, but it's a bit painful. So strong side effects, negative ones. Technology diversity. Everybody loves diversity in tech. We should be diverse. Okay, right? So you are Java developer. Who here among the JVM developers is a Kotlin developer? Less people. Who loves Kotlin? Great. Who hates Kotlin? Oh, you have a love-hate relationship. Great. So I love Kotlin. So if I come to work for your company and you are a JVM shop, I will probably push Kotlin. And most of the time it will work. But imagine now I'm loving Rust even more than Kotlin. I'm learning Rust, and I think that a Rust microservice would be super huge. Like, it's super performant, and it takes less space, less memory, less CPU. And then I push now Rust. And then, again, as with the architect before, I leave the company. And who will maintain this Rust crap? The Kotlin developers, yeah, it will probably be you. So it's hard to recruit good developers in a stack that you know. It's even harder to recruit developers in a stack that you don't know. So this diversity might be good on the individual level, like I love Rust, I will push Rust everywhere, but at the company level, it's a complete crap. You don't want that. You want to have an homogeneous landscape if you can. So the last reason to do microservices might be the lead time, the independent deployment. So this is a project specification. You cannot do anything to like speed it up because the business is mostly responsible for it, but we as IT engineers, we are responsible for implementation and deployment. So this is the lead time. The idea is to have the lead time as small as possible to have a faster time to market. And guess what, young people? Faster time to market, it's not a new problem. We also had this issue before. But before, we had other problems. We had release trains. So we didn't decide to release anytime we wanted. We said there will be 4 or 3 or whatever. You are smiling because it's still the case, right? I feel you. But that's how we did it back in the day, and you are upholding the tradition, which is good. So we shipped at dedicated dates. And of course, the business being the business, they changed their mind, and the developers being the developers, we were late. So basically, if we released 4 times a year, and we missed the train, the business had to wait 3 more months. Was the business happy about it? Probably not. So we had crunches before the release dates, but of course, it still didn't work. We still had issues. So the idea was, hey, there is one reason where we can ship between release trains. If there is a critical bug that we need to fix. Hey, whatever. Let's ship whatever feature in whatever state it is, and there will be a critical bug fix, so we can ship it afterwards. Who played with the rule like this? You are all liars. I believe everybody who had such rules did it at some point. And the fun part is, why did we add release train? Why do we still have release trains when we are working with monolith? Because the idea is it's not possible to release often and test the monolith well. Of course, if it takes you 1 week to test the monolith, then you cannot release more often than once per week. But the fun part about it is that the assumption behind microservices is if you have a smaller scope, you only test the small scope and all the rest works as expected. And nobody even dares to contradict this assumption, which is very funny. So my experience, and this is personal, is that if you have worked several years or even several months on the same project, you might have noticed that not all parts of the code change at the same pace. There are parts that are very, very stable, and there are parts that change very often. In general, there might be 2 reasons for changes. The thing is business requirements, because the business changes all the time. They want new stuff, but on very specific places, and laws. Laws will change the code base randomly in some parts. So how did we address it in the old days? With rules engine. Who knows about rules engine? Yeah, not that many people. So the idea of the rules engine is like, if you have heard, if you are in the Java world about rules, is that you have a specific library that allows you to evaluate some code written in a very specific language, and then you ship the rules engine and you ship the rule. And then afterwards, you can, well, normally that's the idea, you can directly change the rule in production, in real time. No more deployment, no more shipping, no nothing. Which is very dangerous, of course, but which is very good if you have release trains. I'm not saying you should do rules engine. I'm saying this was one of the way to address the problem of like release trains and high lead time. The problem of rules engine is I never used them myself, but once I asked a fellow architect to show me, because the customer on his project has asked about a rule engine. They wanted to bypass IT. And I looked at the rule, and it was code, so basically no business person could ever change the rule by themselves. And it was full of business concepts. So if you were just developer, you were not privy about the stuff, it was also very hard to change. So it's an option, but it's still not the panacea. But behind everything, the idea is we can isolate the quick changing part and move it to something else. It can be a microservice, can be a serverless function, it can be anything. Here, there is a diagram on Chris Richardson companion website, implementing microservices in Java. Who has read the book of Chris Richardson, Microservices in Java? Lots of Java developer? None has read the book? Okay. It's a very, very good book. Really good. I bought it, I started to read it, and halfway through the book, I put it back on my shelf and said, nobody is crazy to do everything that's there. Because it describes all the steps you need to implement in order to do really resilient microservices in Java. For example, the saga pattern. You let go of transactions, stuff that was given for you for free, and you need to implement it with code, by hand, without bugs. Hello. he has created a companion website with a couple of patterns, and this one is called strangling the monolith. So you start with the monolith, and you chop parts by parts until you have a full microservices architecture. And of course, if you are a microservices fanboy, this is your to-be architecture. This is what you want to achieve. And my point is, if everything is stable, but only those two parts are changing, why don't you stop there? Why aren't you pragmatic? So here I have an example. The last part of my presentation will be a demo. So imagine you have a web app and you have a monolith, right? So with a couple of endpoints, you can just chop the parts, and then you put an API gateway in front, and instead of like every call going to the monolith, you can just like redirect or forward one of the endpoints to a chopped part, and you keep the monolith. You don't need to deploy it. I like the previous example because he was telling about e-commerce. I've worked in e-commerce, and for example, my experience is that the pricing changes all the time. That's one thing where the business is super creative. So you can have like the best rule service of the world. They will find ways to have something more. So it's time for a demo. Yep. Do you hear me? Yeah. I'm not sure the recording will hear me, so I will look a bit stupid, but. Yeah. I have my assistant, my faithful assistant. Thanks a lot.
No problem.
Here. Good. Like this. Perfect. Perfect. Clap for him, please. And I kid you not, once I was to a conference, something, I had a handle mic, and then I had to do a demo for 45 minutes. The assistant stood for 45 minutes like this. So it will be better for you. I have two flavors. I have one with a server-side generated app and one with an API and a front end. Which one do you want to see? For the server-side generated pages? Okay, for the API and REST stuff? Okay, so it will be the second one. Origin and API. Okay. So I will start the stuff.
I'm not sure they are looking the same.
Oh, thanks. Huh? Okay. Kurwa mać. This was the right time, right?
Right context.
Right context, yeah. It's all about the right context. So display, where is my display? Main display, extended display, mirror. Better. Thanks. So not only you are holding the mic, but you are giving me good feedback. Okay, this is my app. This is a Spring Boot app because I told you I like Java, I like Kotlin. Everything is in Kotlin, right? And here I have my Docker Compose file. So I have API 6 because I work on the Apache API 6 project, which is an API gateway. I have etcd. Etcd is the storage where API 6 stores its configurations. It's a distributed key value store, just like for Kubernetes. Here I have my backend, and here I have my front end, and here I have MariaDB. So I will just run the configuration. I have two routes in my configuration. I configure everything with an API call. The first one, I will direct everything to the front end. And then if it starts with API, I will redirect everything to the back end. But first, I will remove the API port. So I have two routes, the one that goes to the front end, the one that goes to the back end. And now, normally, at this stage, I have my shop. Amazing. I'm still a developer. So I'm using Bootstrap. I add stuff to the cart. And then here we can see that I will put this. I have the first call is to get the version, because the backend will change the version. So I ask the backend to give me its version, and then I have the checkout. And the response of the checkout is a global object, a global JSON object with the cart and the pricing. Okay? So the first thing that I need to do is to actually change the fact that the pricing, and I can show you the pricing here. I need to make the pricing a route. So here, I have the cart, I transform it to a checkout view, and I embed the cart and the price. So the next step is actually to make the pricing a route. And because I'm not that good and sometimes it doesn't work, I will stop everything. Stop the front end, please. The front end is okay, and then now I can restart it again. And now I still have my 2 initial routes, but I have an additional route. So thanks for 2 seconds. Just stay there. I actually have a route for the checkout, but now that I have a pricing route, right, I need to first get the content of the cart and then call the pricing with the content of the cart. If I do this on the client side, it will be very slow. So what I'm doing is I've created a dedicated route on the API gateway that does this work for me. And actually, it's much closer to the upstream, so it's much faster. And here is what you see. First, I do the checkout where I get the content of the cart, and with the content of the cart, I ask for the price. Thanks. I don't remember if I configured it, so I configure it. On the pricing side now, I have the price. Okay, and now if I come here, so I didn't implement any like persistence session or whatever, so I need to start from the scratch. Here you see it's version 1.3. I add to cart, add to cart, add to cart, and then when I go on the cart, now you can see the checkouts, and the response is the same as before. I just added an additional stuff here. It says monolith. The pricing comes from the monolith, right? And the last step is actually I don't deploy the monolith anymore. What I'm doing, I will just like add an additional route. So this one. So when I call API/price, instead of going to the backend, I go to an Azure function. So if I refresh here, I didn't deploy anything. I just configured. Thanks. And of course, it goes a bit slower. Here you see my little turtle, and I hope it works. No, fail timeout, that because my function is not hot. Yes, now it works. Thanks, I'm good. Thanks a lot. Applause. Thanks. And now you can see that here, my origin is Azure. Why? The only thing that I had to do is I had to copy-paste my pricing function and replace Kotlin with JavaScript. I'm not happy, but at least it works. So now I have 4 routes, just because sometimes it's a bit hard to visualize. The first route goes to the front end. The /API/store goes to the back end. /API checkout goes to the back end and calls API price, and API price go to the FAS. And I don't care whether it's a FAS, whether it's a service, whether it's a rules engine, whatever. It's not important. but I have just chopped this part. And it's the end. So thanks for your attention. You can follow me on Twitter, even though I believe it's dead. You can follow me on Mastodon. You can follow me on Blue Sky if you have a Blue Sky invite. If you are interested about the codes, everything is on GitHub. I have a bit.ly link so I can check how many people did actually check the codes. And if I got you interested in Apache API 6, please have a look. That's the reason I can come to a nice conference like this one. And now we have exactly 5 minutes for questions, which is amazing. And I remember that Polish people are not very happy to communicate, so I have like stickers for questions. One question?
So how you control the contract between monolith and your chopped?
So the question is, how do I control the contract between the monolith and the chopped part? But I'm not sure I understand the question.
Because let's say if you are also the author of chopped part, this is not much a problem. But if there will be another team created for this part, there will be problem with communication.
So the question is again about organization, and I told you at the beginning, all problems come from communication. This is not a technical problem, this is a communication problem. So that's a good question, and it depends on your organization. But yes, you need to make sure, just like in a microservice kind of organization, a monolith kind of organization, that your teams somehow talk to each other. There is no magic recipe on that. There is no Kubernetes for Teams yet. Other questions? Yes?
How do you recognize the parts that should be chopped out of the monolith?
How do I recognize the parts that need to be chopped out of the monolith? That's a great question, and it's very context dependent. My experience is that you need to work several months or several years on the same application to recognize it. So if you are doing 3 months on like a consultant and go to another place, it's not up to you to tell this part needs to be chopped. However, if you are pragmatic and if you start with a monolith, then you will, after some time, see which parts are changing. If you are, like, let's say, parachuted on a project, you need to look at the Git repo to see which package are very often impacted.
So when you start with the monolith, right?
When you start with the monolith, correct. You always start with the monolith. Actually, my opinion, there is one single reason why you would move to microservices. One, scaling, but not scaling technical. That's bull crap, right? Stack Overflow is running a monolith, and they handle a lot more traffic than most of you, if not all of you. The only reason is to scale your development team. When you have too many people working on the same code base, that might be the time to think about migrating. But then be smart about it. You have a big monolith, you don't say, hey, we will create 20 microservices. No, perhaps you chop it in 2 or 3, and it's good enough. I worked at some time on an Nespresso web application, which serves the whole world. It's a really, really huge project. It powers the web app, it powers the mobile apps, iPhone and Android both. We were close to 70 developers. At that time, it started to be a bit hard to do deployment. We had a dedicated release manager, we had many branches, and it started to be a bit messy. That was at this time that we could have really planned to remove a part, or perhaps cut it into 2, or whatever, but not explode everything. But that's my experience, whereas your experience might be different. But don't do microservices because you read it somewhere. Don't do microservices because it's cool and you want it to have on your resume. Do it because you have no other choice. You know the first rule of distributed systems? Don't do distributed systems. Experts of distributed systems, they actually advise you not to do it. If you are a guru of microservices, you should advise people not to do it unless it's really necessary. And it's Zero. Thanks a lot. I will be staying for a couple of minutes, so if you have questions, come to me. Thanks.